Welcome to the case for skipping thin asparagus at the grocery store. In this video, we unpack the great asparagus deception, explore the fiber factor, and examine why thick spears often outperform their slimmer counterparts in nutrition, cooking, and flavor. We'll pull back the curtain on restaurant bias, agricultural realities, and the science of root systems, storage, and freshness that affect what ends up on your plate. By the end, you'll have practical tips for buying, cooking, and budgeting, plus a real-world look at price and waste. 1. The great asparagus deception that's fooling shoppers. Walking through the produce aisle, you've probably been tempted by those neat bundles of tender gourmet, thin asparagus spears. They look delicate and refined, almost elegant in their slender appearance. But here's something that might surprise you. Those pencil-thin stalks you're reaching for could be the inferior choice. Penn State professor Peter Ferretti reveals that supermarkets bundle thin asparagus as tender gourmet style, but spears larger than half an inch in diameter are actually more tender and higher in soluble fiber and vitamins than thinner spears. This marketing sleight of hand has convinced countless shoppers to choose the wrong asparagus for decades. The food industry has successfully convinced us that thinner equals better, but the science tells a completely different story. 2. The fiber factor that changes everything. The fiber in thin stalks is more concentrated, making them actually tougher than their fat sisters. This revelation turns conventional wisdom on its head. When we think about tender vegetables, we instinctively imagine delicate, thin specimens. But asparagus operates by different rules entirely. The vegetable's fiber is slightly more concentrated in thinner spears. Young asparagus plants put more energy into producing spears that will stand upright, so most of the plant material in younger asparagus plants is crude fiber, the cellulose-based material found in outer layers of vegetables. This means that when you bite into a thin spear, you're getting more of that tough, stringy texture that can turn a pleasant meal into a workout for your jaw. 3. The nutritional superiority of thick spears. Spears larger than half an inch in diameter are higher in soluble fiber and vitamins than thinner spears. Thicker stalks are usually higher in fiber, according to Peter Ferretti, professor of vegetable crops at Pennsylvania State University. This isn't just about texture, it's about getting more nutritional bang for your buck. Think about it this way. When you choose thick asparagus, you're not just getting a more tender bite, you're actually getting more nutrients per serving. The mature plant that produces thick spears has had time to develop its full nutritional profile. Youthful, healthy root masses tend to yield thicker asparagus. A healthy plant equals healthier produce on your plate. 4. The restaurant industry's misleading influence. Restaurant chefs prefer thinner spears to create visually appealing recipes and garnishes. Restaurant chefs largely prefer thinner stalks for aesthetic quality and because it cooks more quickly. This professional preference has trickled down to home cooks, but what works for a restaurant doesn't necessarily work for your family dinner. Restaurants prioritize speed and visual appeal over nutritional content and eating experience. Those thin spears might look prettier arranged on a plate, but they're not giving diners the best asparagus experience possible. When chefs need to plate hundreds of dishes per night, quick cooking thin asparagus makes their job easier, but that doesn't mean it's the better choice for your home kitchen. 5. The agricultural truth behind thin asparagus. Asparagus growers are picking crops earlier to stimulate plant growth, harvesting plants for 2 weeks in the second year when spears are about 3/8 to 1/2 inch in diameter. Growers are reluctant to waste an entire crop when their management plan calls for harvesting thinner spears, so vegetable retailers found a marketable niche by touting thinner asparagus as a gourmet item. This reveals the uncomfortable truth. Thin asparagus exists primarily for economic reasons, not culinary ones. Instead of waiting for asparagus to reach optimal thickness and tenderness, growers harvest early to maximize their yield and profits. What you're getting isn't premium produce, it's essentially an agricultural byproduct that's been remarketed as a delicacy. 6. The cooking method advantage of thick spears. Thicker stalks are better for broiling and roasting because they will stand up to intense dry heat that would quickly shrivel skinnier spears, and they're easier to manipulate for grilling. For roasting, Thicker asparagus is better because it won't get too soft and floppy too quickly. Thicker asparagus work best for grilled asparagus because they can stand up to intense heat, while thinner spears would likely shrivel and dry out on fiery grill grates. When you're trying to achieve those beautiful char marks and that perfect tender crisp texture, thick asparagus gives you much more control over the cooking process. 7. The timing troubles with thin asparagus. Very thin asparagus takes as little as 8 to 12 minutes to roast, whereas thicker asparagus needs 12 to 15 minutes. Thin asparagus is easier to overcook and actually tends to be less tender than thicker varieties. This narrow cooking window makes thin asparagus a risky choice for home cooks. Have you ever had asparagus that went from perfectly cooked to mushy disaster in what felt like seconds? That's the thin asparagus experience. The margin for error is so small that even experienced cooks struggle to nail the perfect doneness. Meanwhile, thick spears give you a generous window to work with, making it nearly impossible to mess up. 8. The waste factor nobody talks about. Here's something grocery stores won't tell you about thin asparagus. You're throwing away more edible vegetable than you realize. When you snap asparagus one spear at a time, you actually waste a lot of good asparagus because the ends that snap off have a lot of tender green still attached. With thick asparagus, you get more actual eating per dollar spent. The ratio of edible vegetable to waste is significantly better, meaning your grocery budget stretches further. When you're buying thin asparagus, you're essentially paying premium prices for less food. 9. The taste test reality check. When comparing thick and thin spears side by side, both tasted equally sweet, nutty, and grassy, but the thicker spears actually had the better texture. There is little taste difference between thin and thick asparagus spears, but the thinner vegetables can be tougher to chew. This means you're not sacrificing any flavor by choosing thick spears, you're actually getting a better eating experience. The asparagus taste you love is identical, but the texture is superior. It's like choosing between a tough steak and a tender one that tastes exactly the same. The choice becomes obvious. 10. The root system science that matters. Thickness is actually a sign of the age of the crown or root bed of asparagus. Young crowns produce thin spears while older crowns produce thicker spears. The thickness of an asparagus spear is determined by the vigor of the plant and where the spear grows on the root mass, with youthful, healthy root masses yielding thicker asparagus and spears near the center producing fatter spears. This biological reality means that thick asparagus represents the plant at its peak performance. A mature, healthy root system produces the best asparagus the plant is capable of creating. When you choose thin asparagus, you're essentially choosing the plant's juvenile efforts over its mature masterpiece. 11. The storage and freshness challenge. Thin asparagus faces unique storage challenges that thick asparagus handles better. Asparagus is displayed in water at grocery stores and should be stored like a bouquet of flowers with cut ends submerged in about 1 inch of water. But thin asparagus degrades faster due to its higher surface area to volume ratio. Those delicate thin spears lose moisture more quickly, becoming limp and unappetizing faster than their thick counterparts. When you're trying to keep asparagus fresh for several days, thick spears give you more time to use them before they deteriorate. This means less food waste and more reliable meal planning. 12. The economic reality of premium pricing. Here's the final kicker that should seal the deal against thin asparagus. You're often paying more money for an inferior product. Vegetable retailers found a marketable niche for thin asparagus by touting it as a gourmet item, even though many shoppers think younger and thinner equals tenderness when the opposite is true. The food industry has successfully convinced consumers to pay premium prices for what amounts to an early harvest byproduct. It's like paying extra for unripe fruit because someone convinced you it was artisanal. The marketing has been so effective that people actively seek out the lesser product and feel good about spending more money on it.